All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Blaise Pascal. There's a moment in every seeker's life when they realize they've been running a race that has no finish line. Not because the race is infinite, but because they've been running in circles, chasing a phantom version of themselves that exists only in the fevered dreams of a culture gone mad with motion. For 7 years, I woke up before the sun, not to greet it, but to beat it. My phone was an altar, notifications my scripture, and productivity my God. I measured my worth in output, my identity in accomplishments, my existence in the desperate hum of perpetual motion. I was, by every external metric, winning, and internally, I was dying by millimeters. Then I did something that terrified me more than failure ever could. I stopped. For 30 days, I quit hustle culture cold turkey. No 5 a.m. alarms, no multitasking, no grinding while they're sleeping, no treating my body like a machine and my mind like a server processing endless requests. I stepped out of the current and sat on the riverbank. What I found there wasn't laziness. It wasn't falling behind. It wasn't the collapse I'd been conditioned to fear. It was my brain finally allowed to breathe, showing me what it actually looked like when it wasn't performing for an audience of algorithms, investors, and the ghost of my own inadequacy. And what I witnessed in those 30 days has fundamentally rewritten my relationship with time, success, and the very nature of human potential. We are living through the greatest epidemic of busyness in human history. Not productivity, busyness. There's a difference so profound it separates those who are building cathedrals from those who are merely stacking bricks in the dark. Hustle culture didn't emerge from nowhere. It's the secular religion of the modern achiever, promising salvation through optimization, enlightenment through efficiency, transcendence through the endless to-do list. It tells us that if we could just do more, we would finally be enough. But here's what the neuroscientists are now confirming, what the mystics have always known, and what my 30-day experiment forced me to confront directly. The part of you that believes more motion creates more meaning is the same part of you that hasn't sat alone in a room with no agenda for more than 15 minutes since you were a child. The brain on constant hustle isn't a brain optimized for brightness. It's a brain optimized for survival. And survival mode, sustained indefinitely, doesn't produce breakthrough thinking, profound creativity, or the kind of insight that changes lives. It produces burnout, shallow processing, and the quiet erosion of the very self you're trying to build. What if the greatest work you ever do isn't something you produce, but something you become? What if the next level of your life requires not more effort, but a different kind of attention? What if the voice telling you to slow down isn't your laziness, it's your wisdom, finally getting a word in edgewise after years of being shouted down by the tyranny of more? These aren't rhetorical questions. They are the doorway through which I walked 30 days ago, and what I found on the other side has implications not just for how we work, but how we love, how we parent, how we create wealth, how we connect with the divine, and how we face the one question that no amount of hustle can answer. When it's all over, did I actually live? This isn't a story of quitting, it's a story of returning. Returning to the kind of attention that existed before the smartphone. Returning to the quality of presence that our ancestors brought to every meal, every conversation, every moment of simply watching the light change. Returning to a version of yourself that doesn't need to prove its worth through output because it knows its worth through existence. The ancient Greeks had 2 words for time: chronos, the linear, measurable, ticking clock time of schedules and deadlines, and kairos, the deep, qualitative, opportune moment when something sacred breaks through. Hustle culture worships chronos. It measures life in increments and mistakes motion for meaning. But the brain, the actual biological organ in your skull, not the productivity app in your pocket, doesn't thrive in Chronos. It requires Kairos. It requires spaciousness. It requires the kind of attention that can only emerge when you stop treating every moment as something to be exploited and start treating it as something to be inhabited. What I didn't know when I started this experiment, but learned through it, is that the brain has a network specifically designed for the kind of deep, integrative, creative thinking that hustle culture destroys. It's called the default mode network. And for years, I had been so terrified of silence, so addicted to stimulation, so convinced that every moment needed to be filled with input or output that I never let this network activate. The default mode network is what comes online when you're not focused on any external task. It's the part of you that integrates past experience, imagines future possibilities, constructs your sense of self, and generates the kind of insights that feel like they come from somewhere beyond you. In hustle culture, we treat this network as the enemy. We call it procrastination. We call it wasting time. We medicate it with caffeine, drown it in podcasts, distract it with scrolling. But here's the truth I discovered. The default mode network isn't laziness. It's where your deepest intelligence lives. And when you starve it, you don't become more productive. You become shallower, more reactive, less capable of the kind of original thought that actually moves your life forward. The first 3 days of my experiment were agony. Not because I had urgent work I was neglecting. I'd planned for this, cleared my calendar, told my team I was unreachable. The agony was internal. My brain, accustomed to the constant drip of dopamine from task completion, notifications, and the illusion of progress, went into withdrawal. I felt restless, irritable, convinced I was falling behind, certain that somewhere out there my competitors were grinding and gaining ground while I sat on my couch staring at the ceiling. But here's what I learned in those first days. The discomfort of stopping isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you've been doing something unsustainable for so long that your nervous system has forgotten what equilibrium feels like. By day 5, something shifted. The restlessness didn't disappear, but something else emerged alongside it. A quiet spaciousness I hadn't felt since childhood. Thoughts that had been buried under the noise began surfacing. Memories, ideas, connections I'd never made before. And underneath all of it, a question I'd been running from for years. Who am I, really, when no one is watching and nothing is being produced? So I invite you, in the next 30 minutes of this journey, to consider what might be waiting for you on the other side of your own compulsive motion. Not to quit your ambitions, not to abandon your goals, but to ask whether the path you're on is actually leading where you want to go, or whether you've been so busy moving that you haven't noticed you're walking in circles. The brain that emerges from hustle culture isn't a brain that's been optimized. It's a brain that's been colonized by external metrics, by social comparison, by a definition of success that was handed to you before you were old enough to ask whether it fit. My 30 days of stillness didn't make me less ambitious. They made my ambition more intelligent. They filtered out the noise and left me with signal. They showed me that the things I thought I wanted were often just placeholders for the things I actually needed. And in the end, they revealed something I'd suspected but never confirmed. The voice telling you to slow down isn't trying to sabotage you, it's trying to save you. In the next section, we'll explore the core themes and concepts that emerged from this experiment, the illusions hustle culture sold us, the truths that only stillness can reveal, and the ancient wisdom traditions that have been saying for millennia what neuroscience is only now confirming. Because this isn't just a personal story, it's a universal one, and the principles I uncovered have the power to transform not just how you work, but how you experience everything. There's a lie at the heart of hustle culture, so pervasive, so embedded in our collective consciousness, that questioning it feels like questioning gravity. The lie is this, that your value is directly proportional to your output, that more effort equals more worth, that if you're not exhausted, you're not trying hard enough, that somewhere, someone is outworking you, and if you don't keep pace, you'll be left behind, forgotten, irrelevant, a cautionary tale whispered in entrepreneurial circles about the one who stopped moving and disappeared. This lie didn't emerge from nowhere. It's the logical conclusion of a worldview that sees human beings as machines, inputs and outputs, efficiency units, resources to be optimized. And like all powerful lies, it contains a fragment of truth. Effort does matter. Discipline does count. Consistency does compound. But the fragment has been mistaken for the whole. And in that mistake, we've lost something irreplaceable. Let me name them clearly because you can't dismantle what you can't see. Illusion 1, the illusion of scarcity. The belief that there's not enough time, not enough opportunity, not enough success to go around, so you must grab yours before someone else does. This isn't just a belief about the external world, it's a physiological state. Scarcity mentality activates the sympathetic nervous system, floods the body with cortisol, and puts you in a permanent state of low-grade fight or flight. From this state, you cannot create, you cannot connect deeply, you cannot access the parts of your intelligence that require safety and spaciousness. You can only react. Illusion 2, the illusion of future salvation. The conviction that if you just get through this next project, this next quarter, this next year of grinding, you'll finally have the freedom to rest. This is the oldest trap in the human psyche, the belief that happiness is always just around the next corner. Hustle culture weaponizes this tendency, turning your entire life into a preparation for a future that never arrives. You sacrifice the present on the altar of tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. Illusion 3, the identity through achievement. The assumption that what you do is who you are. Strip away your job title, your accomplishments, your list of accolades, and what's left? For most high achievers, the answer is terrifying. Nothing, or at least nothing they've learned to recognize. So they keep achieving, keep producing, keep climbing, because the alternative is facing the void they've never learned to sit with. What happens inside the brain when you stop hustling isn't what hustle culture predicts. It's not decay, it's not falling behind, it's not the slow erosion of your capabilities, it's integration. The default mode network I mentioned earlier, the part of your brain that comes online when you're not focused on external tasks, doesn't just process memories and imagine futures. It does something far more profound. It constructs your sense of self. Think about that. The you that you experience as yourself, the narrator of your inner monologue, the one who makes decisions, the one who has opinions and preferences and a life story. This you is not a fixed entity. It's a construction, assembled moment by this network in your brain. And here's what's crucial. The default mode network can only do its work when you're not trying to do anything else. When you're constantly hustling, constantly focused on external tasks, constantly processing inputs and generating outputs, this self-construction network never gets to run. Your sense of self becomes fragmented, reactive, built from whatever the environment throws at you, rather than from your own deep integration. This is why high achievers often feel empty despite their accomplishments. It's not that they haven't achieved enough. It's that they've never given their brain the space to construct a self that can actually experience satisfaction. Every spiritual tradition worth its salt has something to say about this, because every spiritual tradition emerged from people who did exactly what I did. They stopped moving and paid attention. The Taoists call it wu-wei, action through non-action, the art of doing without forcing, of allowing rather than striving. They understood that the most powerful action often emerges from stillness, that the river carves canyons not by pushing, but by flowing. The Buddhists call it sunyata, emptiness, the recognition that the self we're so desperately trying to build through achievement is, in its essence, empty of inherent existence. Not a reason for despair, but an invitation to freedom. If your identity isn't fixed, you don't have to protect it. If you're not your achievements, you don't have to prove yourself through them. The Stoics called it the dichotomy of control, the recognition that some things are up to you and some are not. Hustle culture convinces you that everything is up to you, that with enough effort you can control outcomes. The Stoics knew better. They knew that peace comes not from controlling everything, but from caring only about what you can actually influence. And the mystics of every tradition have spoken of the still small voice, the divine whisper that can only be heard when the noise stops, not because God is quiet, but because you've been too loud to listen. Here's what I discovered in my 30 days of stillness, and what the data now confirms. The relationship between effort and output is not linear. For years, I believed that if I worked 60 hours, I'd get 60 hours of results. If I worked 80, I'd get 80. The math seemed simple, but the brain doesn't work that way. Creativity doesn't work that way. Breakthrough thinking doesn't work that way. What actually happens is this. Up to a certain point, more effort produces more results. But beyond that point, a point that varies for each person but is almost certainly lower than you think, additional effort produces diminishing returns. And beyond that point, additional effort becomes counterproductive. You're not just wasting time, you're actively degrading the quality of your thinking, your judgment, your creativity, and your emotional regulation. This is the law of reversed effort, articulated by thinkers from Aldous Huxley to Eastern philosophers. When you try too hard, you create the opposite of what you're seeking. Force relaxation and you create tension. Force sleep and you create insomnia. Force creativity and you create block. The deepest insights, the most profound breakthroughs, the solutions to your most intractable problems, they don't come from more effort. They come from the kind of attention that only emerges when effort stops. There's a dance at the heart of all mastery, and it's the dance between control and surrender. Hustle culture teaches only one step: control, grip tighter, push harder, force the outcome. And for certain things, this works. You can force yourself to send the emails, make the calls, check the boxes. But you cannot force insight. You cannot force love. You cannot force the kind of deep connection with another human being that makes life worth living. You cannot force the experience of presence that turns a mundane moment into something sacred. For those things, surrender is required. Not passive resignation, but active allowing. The kind of openness that says, I've done my preparation, I've shown up fully, and now I release the outcome. This is what my 30 days taught me, that the part of my life I could control was much smaller than I thought, and the part I needed to surrender to was much larger. And in that surrender, I didn't lose power. I gained access to a different kind of power, the kind that flows through you rather than from you. Let me name what emerged when I finally stopped moving. First, clarity. Not the clarity of knowing exactly what to do next, but the deeper clarity of knowing what matters. When the noise stopped, the signal emerged. I could suddenly see which of my goals were actually mine and which had been inherited, which pursuits were feeding me and which were draining me, which relationships were real and which were performances. Second, integration. Memories I'd buried, emotions I'd suppressed, parts of myself I'd disowned. They all came forward, not as problems to solve, but as aspects to include. I became more whole, not by adding anything, but by ceasing to exclude. Connection to myself, to others, to something larger. In the stillness, the boundaries between me and not me became more permeable. I felt less separate, less isolated, less like a lone warrior fighting against the world, and more like a wave in an ocean, distinct but not separate. Fourth, creativity. Not the frantic, forced creativity of brainstorming sessions and whiteboard exercises, but the quiet emergence of ideas that felt like they came from somewhere else, because in a real sense they did. They came from the depths of my own intelligence that only becomes accessible in stillness. And fifth, peace. Not the absence of challenge, but the presence of something that doesn't depend on circumstances. A baseline of well-being that persists regardless of whether things are going well or poorly. The kind of peace that hustle culture promises but can never deliver because it's selling the destination while keeping you on the treadmill. These aren't just nice ideas. They're not spiritual platitudes to post on Instagram while you continue grinding. They're descriptions of what actually happens when you give your brain the conditions it needs to function optimally. The neuroscience confirms it. The brain on stillness is more integrated, more creative, more emotionally regulated, more capable of deep insight. The psychology confirms it. People who practice regular periods of unfocused attention report higher well-being, better relationships, and more meaning. The wisdom traditions confirm it. The path to wisdom has always run through the desert, the mountain, the quiet room where nothing happens. So why don't we do it? Because we're afraid of what we'll find in the silence, afraid that if we stop moving, we'll realize we've been running from something, afraid that without the constant motion, the emptiness we've been filling with achievement will finally become visible. And here's the truth I discovered. That emptiness is real. It's there whether you're moving or still. The difference is, when you're still, you can finally see it. And when you can see it, you can finally do something about it, not by filling it with more achievement, but by discovering that what you thought was emptiness was actually space for something real to grow. In the next section, we'll go deeper into the symbolic dimension of this journey. We'll explore the myths and metaphors that have guided seekers for millennia, the stories that encode the wisdom of what happens when you stop running and start being. Because this isn't just a personal experiment or a collection of concepts, it's an initiation, and every initiation follows a pattern that's been woven into human consciousness since the beginning.
There's an old story they tell in certain spiritual circles, a story that haunted me throughout my 30 days of stillness because I recognized myself in it. A man is drowning in the ocean. The waves crash over him, pulling him under, and he fights with everything he has, kicking, thrashing, gasping for air between swells. In the distance, he sees a boat. He screams for help. The people in the boat see him. They throw a line, but he's so focused on fighting the waves, so consumed by the battle, that he doesn't see it. He keeps thrashing, keeps struggling, keeps fighting the ocean with every ounce of his strength. The boat moves closer. They shout to him, "Stop fighting! Just float! The water will hold you!" But he can't hear them. Or rather, he hears them, but the idea of stopping, of surrendering to the very thing that's trying to kill him, makes no sense. So he keeps fighting and fighting and fighting. Eventually, exhausted beyond measure, his body gives out. He stops struggling, and in that moment of absolute surrender, he discovers what the boat people were trying to tell him. The water does hold him. It holds him effortlessly. He floats. This is the parable of the modern achiever. We're drowning in the ocean of our own ambition, convinced that the only thing keeping us alive is our struggle. And all the while, the water holds us. It always has. We just never stopped fighting long enough to feel it. In the Hermetic tradition, there's a concept called the magnum opus, the great work of turning lead into gold. For centuries, alchemists labored over their furnaces, mixing substances, seeking the philosopher's stone that would transform base metals into precious ones. But the deepest alchemists knew something that the mere chemists never understood. The transformation wasn't really about metal, it was about the soul. The lead was the dense, heavy, contracted self, the part of you shaped by fear, by scarcity, by the desperate need to prove your worth. The gold was the liberated self, the one that knows its value doesn't depend on achievement, that radiates rather than strives, that attracts rather than pursues. And here's what the true alchemists understood. You cannot transform lead into gold by hammering it harder. You cannot force density into radiance through effort. The transformation requires a different kind of fire, not the fire of more striving, but the fire of presence, of attention, of the kind of awareness that burns away everything that isn't essential. For years, I had been trying to turn my lead into gold through the only method I knew: more work, more achievement, more hustle. I was hammering the lead, and all I got was flattened lead. What I discovered in my 30 days of stillness was the alchemist's true secret. The transformation happens not when you add something, but when you remove everything that isn't you. Not when you work harder, but when you stop working long enough to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. There's a Persian myth about twin brothers born to a king, one named Dreamer, one named Doer. The king, unable to decide which should inherit the throne, sends them on a quest. Doer sets out immediately. He builds bridges, conquers armies, negotiates treaties, accumulates wealth and power. He moves constantly, always acting, always achieving. By any external measure, he's succeeding brilliantly. Dreamer does something different. He sits at the edge of the forest for 3 days, just watching. Then he walks into the forest and sits by a river for another 3 days, just listening. Then he climbs a mountain and sits at its peak for more 3 days, just being. Doer, hearing of this, sends messengers. "Brother, while you sit, I conquer. While you dream, I achieve. When I return to our father, I will have everything to show for my journey, and you will have nothing." Dreamer sends back a single message: "I am learning to see." Years pass. Finally, both brothers return to the kingdom. Doer arrives first, laden with treasure, accompanied by allies, his reputation preceding him. He stands before the king and presents all he's accomplished. Then Dreamer arrives. He carries nothing. He brings no treasures, no allies, no proof of his journey. But when he enters the throne room, something strange happens. Everyone falls silent, not because he demands attention, but because his presence is attention. He looks at his father, the king, and in that look is a depth of recognition, a quality of seeing that the king has never experienced from anyone. The king rises from his throne, walks to his son, and embraces him. "You," he says, "have brought me the only thing worth bringing. You have brought yourself." Doer protests, "But father, look at all I've achieved. Look at what I've built." And the king replies, "You have built many things, my son, but your brother has become someone. And in the end, it is not what we build, but who we become in the building." Zoom out far enough, and the frantic motion of human striving starts to look like something else entirely. From space, you cannot see the stock market. You cannot see the deadlines, the quarterly reports, the competitive analysis, the endless scrolling for validation. From space, what you see is a blue marble turning in darkness, life clinging to its surface like moss on a stone, beautiful and fragile, and utterly indifferent to our measures of success. The ancient Greeks had a word for this perspective: theoria. It meant seeing from a distance, beholding the whole. From this vantage, the things that consume us, the missed promotion, the slow quarter, the competitor's advantage, dissolve into irrelevance, not because they don't matter in some way, but because they're revealed as smaller than we thought. I spent days of my experiment just looking at the night sky, not thinking about it, not philosophizing about it, just looking.
letting the immensity of it soak into my nervous system. And what I felt wasn't insignificance, that old existential dread of being small in a vast universe. What I felt was inclusion. I wasn't separate from that vastness, looking at it from outside. I was part of it, made of the same stuff, subject to the same laws, participating in the same cosmic dance. The hustle culture mind sees the universe as backdrop, setting, stage for the drama of human achievement. But the still mind sees something else, that we are the universe, temporarily local, briefly conscious, playing a role in a story so much larger than our individual dramas.
There's a teaching story from the Zen tradition about a seeker who climbs a mountain to find a legendary sage. After days of difficult travel, he reaches the cave where the sage is said to live. He enters, expecting to find an ancient master who will give him the answers he seeks. But the cave is empty, except for walls covered in polished stone, so reflective that they act as mirrors. Everywhere the seeker looks, he sees only himself. He waits for hours, then days, but the sage never appears. Finally, in frustration, he leaves. Descending the mountain, he meets another traveler who asks, "Did you find the sage?" The seeker shakes his head. There was no one there, only mirrors. The traveler smiles. Then you found exactly what you were looking for. This is what stillness does. It removes the distractions and leaves you with yourself. Not the self you perform for others, not the self you've constructed through achievement, but the self that's been there all along, waiting to be seen. For years, I had avoided this encounter. I filled every moment with input, with output, with anything that would keep me from having to sit in that cave and face what I'd find there. I was afraid, I think, that if I looked closely enough, I'd find nothing, just emptiness, just void, just the absence of everything I'd tried to become. But what I actually found in those 30 days was something else entirely. I found a self that didn't need to prove its worth because its worth was built into its existence. I found a presence that didn't need to achieve because it already was. I found in the mirror of stillness not the nothing I'd feared, but the everything I'd been seeking through all my striving. Imagine a river flowing toward the ocean. It moves with power, with purpose, carving canyons over millennia, nourishing everything in its path. Now imagine someone builds a dam. The water backs up, pools become still. To an outside observer, it might look like the river has stopped. It might look like it's no longer fulfilling its purpose. But what's actually happening is that the river is gathering itself. It's accumulating mass, building pressure. And when the dam eventually breaks, and it will break, the river doesn't just continue, it explodes forward with a force that reshapes everything downstream. This is what my 30 days of stillness taught me about the relationship between rest and action. The stopping wasn't the end of my forward movement, it was the gathering of force. The quiet wasn't the absence of power, it was the accumulation of it. We've been sold a lie about the linear nature of progress. We think that to move forward, we must always be in motion, but nature knows better. The seed rests in the soil before it sprouts. The fetus rests in the womb before it's born. The artist rests in the gap between inspiration and creation. Rest isn't the opposite of movement, it's the source of it. There's an archetype that appears across cultures and traditions, the wounded healer, the shaman who was broken and remade, the king who lost everything and regained something greater, the hero who descended into the underworld and returned with gifts for the living. This archetype encodes a truth that my 30 days of stillness forced me to confront, that our deepest wounds, when we stop running from them, become our greatest sources of power. For years, I had been hustling to outrun my wounds, the fear of not being enough, the shame of past failures, the grief of losses I'd never fully processed. All of it was fuel for the fire of my ambition. Keep moving, don't look down, don't feel what's there. But in the stillness, there was nowhere to run. The wounds came forward, not as enemies to defeat, but as aspects to integrate. And when I stopped fighting them, something shifted. They stopped being sources of pain and started being sources of wisdom. The places where I'd been broken became the places where light could enter. The experiences I'd been running from became the experiences I could now offer to others. This is the deepest paradox of the inner work. What you resist persists, but what you welcome transforms. The wounds you run from will chase you forever. The wounds you turn to face become your teachers. So what do all these stories tell us? They tell us that the journey away from hustle culture isn't a journey away from success. It's a journey toward a different kind of success, the kind that can't be measured by external metrics because it lives in the quality of your presence, the depth of your connections, the authenticity of your expression. They tell us that the fear of stopping, the terror that if we slow down we'll fall behind, is not a sign that we're on the right track. It's a sign that we've been running from something that needs our attention. They tell us that the emptiness we're afraid to face in stillness isn't a void to be filled. It's a space to be inhabited. It's the room we need to create something new, to become someone new, to let the life that's been waiting for us finally emerge. And they tell us that the initiation we're undergoing, whether we chose it or life chose it for us, is not a punishment, it's a privilege. It's the path that every sage, every mystic, every truly wise person has walked before us. The path of stopping, of facing, of integrating, of returning. The drowning man becomes the floater. The alchemist's lead becomes gold. The dreamer becomes the king. The seeker in the mirror cave becomes the one he was seeking all along. In the next section, we'll bring all of this down to earth. We'll explore what these truths mean for your actual life, your money, your relationships, your work, your health. Because wisdom that isn't lived isn't wisdom at all. It's just information. The question isn't whether these truths resonate. The question is what you're going to do with them. After 30 days of stillness, after all the insights and integrations and symbolic awakenings, I had to face the question that every spiritual seeker must eventually confront. Now what? How do you take the wisdom of the cave back into the marketplace? How do you maintain connection to the infinite while navigating the finite demands of deadlines, relationships, and rent? How do you become a person who can both float on the ocean and row toward shore? This is where most spiritual journeys falter. We have the profound experience, the mountaintop revelation, the deep insight, and then we return to our lives, and within weeks, sometimes days, the old patterns reassert themselves. The insights become memories. The transformation fades. We're left wondering whether any of it was real. But here's what I learned. Integration isn't automatic. It's a practice. It's a set of disciplines, choices, and frameworks that bridge the eternal and the everyday. And if you want the stillness to actually change your life, not just your perspective, but your actual, concrete, measurable existence, you have to build those bridges intentionally. Let me offer you 4 practical doorways through which the wisdom of stillness can enter your daily life. Each corresponds to a different dimension of your existence, and each requires a different kind of practice. Doorway 1. Time and attention. The first and most obvious place where hustle culture lives is in your relationship with time. The clock is not just a measurement, it's a psychological structure. How you inhabit time determines how you inhabit your life. Here's what I discovered in my 30 days. The problem wasn't that I had too much to do. The problem was that I approached everything I did with the same frantic energy, as if each task were an emergency, each email a crisis, each moment an opportunity to be maximized. The practical shift is this. Learn to distinguish between urgency and importance.
Urgency is the feeling that something must happen now. Importance is the recognition that something matters deeply. Hustle culture collapses the two, making everything feel urgent. Stillness teaches you that most things aren't urgent at all, and that the things that truly matter require the kind of attention that only emerges when urgency subsides. The practice: for 1 week, before you begin any task, pause for 30 seconds. Ask yourself, if this were the only thing I did today, would it be enough? Not as a productivity hack, but as a way of calibrating your attention to what actually matters. You'll be surprised how many tasks fail this test, and how much more present you are for the ones that pass. Doorway 2: Money and Meaning. Money is one of the most spiritually charged substances in human life. It's not just currency, it's stored energy, frozen time, crystallized attention. How you relate to money reveals how you relate to life itself. Hustle culture taught me to see money as a scoreboard, proof that I was winning, evidence of my worth, validation of my existence. Every dollar was a point, and I was desperately trying to accumulate enough points to finally feel secure. But here's what the stillness revealed. Money is not the score, it's the resource, and resources are meant to flow, not accumulate. They're meant to support life, not replace it. The practice: for 30 days, track not just what you spend, but how you feel when you spend it. Notice where money flows easily and where it flows with resistance. Notice where spending brings joy and where it brings anxiety. Notice where you're using money to fill emotional holes that money was never designed to fill. This isn't about budgeting, it's about becoming conscious of the energy exchange that money represents. And consciousness, applied consistently, transforms everything. Doorway 3: Relationships and Boundaries. The quality of your life is, to a significant degree, the quality of your relationships, and the quality of your relationships is determined by the quality of your presence within them. Hustle culture taught me to treat relationships as transactions, networking opportunities, strategic connections, mutual benefits exchanges. I didn't say this out loud, of course, but my behavior revealed it. I was always slightly elsewhere in conversations, mentally checking emails during dinners, present in body but absent in spirit. The stillness taught me something uncomfortable. I couldn't be present with others because I couldn't be present with myself. My attention was fragmented, scattered, always reaching for the next thing, and you cannot give what you do not have. The practice: for the next month, practice what I came to call whole presence in your interactions. When you're with someone, be with them. Phone away. Mind elsewhere, gently bring it back. Listen not to respond, but to understand. Notice what arises in you when you're truly present with another person. The depth, the connection, the sense of being met that emerges when you're actually available to meet another. And here's the harder part: boundaries. Stillness taught me that not everyone deserves my presence. Some relationships drain, some feed. Some are based on mutual recognition, some on mutual exploitation. The still mind can feel the difference, and the integrated life requires acting on that feeling, protecting your energy, preserving your attention, choosing consciously where to invest your finite relational capacity. Doorway 4: Work and Purpose. This is the big one, the place where most of us feel the tension between the wisdom of stillness and the demands of the world most acutely. How do you pursue excellence without becoming possessed by it? How do you work hard without hustling your soul away? The answer lies in a distinction I had to learn the hard way: the difference between doing and forcing. Doing is action that flows from presence. It's aligned, focused, effective, but also relaxed. It's the surgeon's hands during an operation, precise, powerful, utterly present, and also calm. Forcing is action that flows from fear. It's tight, desperate, effortful, and ultimately counterproductive. It's the same surgeon, but now her hands are shaking. The practice: for each major work task, ask yourself, am I doing this or forcing this? The feeling is different. Doing feels like participation in something larger. Forcing feels like you're carrying the whole world on your shoulders. Doing trusts the process. Forcing needs to control the outcome. Doing can sustain itself indefinitely. Forcing burns out. If you find yourself forcing, pause, breathe, reconnect with why this work matters, not as a means to an end, money, status, validation, but as an expression of something genuine in you. The task may be the same, but the energy behind it transforms everything.
Beyond these doorways, I developed 5 daily practices that kept me connected to the stillness, even as I re-engaged with the world. Think of them as anchors, not adding time to your day, but infusing the time you already have with a different quality of attention. Anchor 1, the morning pause. Before you check your phone, before you start your list, before you do anything, pause. 5 minutes, 10 if you can. Sit with yourself. Feel your breath. Notice the light. Let the day come to you rather than rushing out to meet it. This single practice, done consistently, changes everything. Anchor 2, the single task. Choose one thing each day to do with complete, undivided attention. Not multitasking, not half listening to a podcast while you work. Just the thing, fully inhabited. It could be making tea. It could be writing an email. It could be walking to the store. The content doesn't matter. The quality of attention does. Anchor 3, the transition ritual. Between activities, create a gap. 1 minute, 3 deep breaths, a look out the window, a conscious closing of one chapter before opening the next. These micropauses prevent the accumulation of momentum that leads to burnout. They keep you fresh, present, available. Anchor 4, the body check. Several times a day, bring attention to your body. Where is there tension? Where is there ease? What is your posture communicating to your nervous system? The body is the anchor of presence. When you're in your body, you're in the now. When you're in your head, you're everywhere and nowhere. Anchor 5, the gratitude close. At the end of each day, before sleep, take 2 minutes to acknowledge something genuine, not forced positivity, not toxic gratitude that denies difficulty, just one real thing you're grateful for. This trains the brain to scan for what's good, counteracting the negativity bias that hustle culture exploits. Let me show you how this applies across the 12 dimensions we're weaving through this journey, because wisdom that isn't embodied in every area isn't wisdom at all. Health and fitness. The body is not a machine to be optimized, it's a temple to be honored. Stillness taught me to exercise from presence, not punishment, to move because movement feels good, not because I'm trying to fix something broken. The results? Better consistency, less injury, more genuine vitality. Emotional life. Emotions are not problems to solve, they're information to integrate. When I stopped running from difficult feelings, they stopped running my life. The fear, the anger, the grief, they all became teachers rather than tyrants. Intellectual life. The mind is not a hard drive to fill, it's a garden to tend. Stillness didn't make me less intelligent, it made my intelligence more available. The insights that emerge from spacious attention are qualitatively different from the ones forced by concentrated effort. Character. Who you are when no one is watching is who you actually are. Stillness revealed the gaps between my professed values and my actual behavior, and gave me the space to close them, not through effort, but through awareness. Spirituality. The divine is not found in special experiences, it's found in ordinary presence. The same attention I brought to my morning pause became available in traffic, in meetings, in conversations. The sacred isn't elsewhere, it's here, when you're fully here to meet it. Love and relationships. The quality of your relationships is the quality of your presence within them. Stillness taught me to listen differently, to be available differently, to love without the need to control or possess. Parenting and legacy. You cannot give your children what you don't have.
The greatest gift I can offer is not my achievements, but my presence, the model of a life lived with attention, integrity, and love. Social life. Not all connections are nourishing. Stillness clarified which relationships were mutual and which were draining, and gave me the courage to act on that clarity. Financial life. Money flows toward value. When I stopped hustling and started creating from alignment, the financial picture didn't collapse, it transformed. Less frantic, more sustainable, more genuinely abundant. Career. Purpose isn't found, it's uncovered. Stillness peeled away the layers of should and must and revealed what I actually cared about. And the work that emerged from that clarity was better than anything I forced. Quality of life. Joy is not in the destination, it's in the quality of attention you bring to the journey. Stillness didn't remove challenges, but it changed my relationship to them. The same life, experienced differently. Life experience. Meaning is not something you achieve, it's something you notice. The still mind sees significance in the ordinary, depth in the everyday, the sacred in the mundane. And in that seeing, life becomes worth living, not someday, but now. So here I am, 30 days later, back in the world. The emails are still there, the deadlines still approach, the demands of life haven't disappeared. But I'm different. Not because I've achieved some permanent state of enlightenment, not because I'll never fall back into old patterns, but because I now have a reference point, a memory of what it feels like to be still, to be present, to be genuinely alive rather than frantically busy. And that reference point changes everything. When I feel the old momentum building, the old urgency rising, the old panic that I'm not doing enough, I can pause and remember. I can choose differently. I can return to the practices that keep me anchored. This is the integration, not perfection, but practice. Not a one-time transformation, but a daily return. Not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a new way of traveling. In our final section, we'll bring all of this together. We'll weave the threads, the personal story, the conceptual framework, the symbolic depth, the practical application into a coherent whole. And we'll end with an invitation that's not just about watching, but about living. Because the point of all this isn't to consume another piece of content. The point is to let something in this content awaken something in you, something that's been there all along, waiting for the stillness to arrive.
30 days. In the grand architecture of a human life, it's nothing. A breath, a blink, a single page in a 1,000-volume story. And yet, in those 30 days, something shifted that 30 years of striving could not accomplish. I didn't quit ambition. I quit the religion of ambition, the belief that my worth was earned through output, that my identity was constructed through achievement, that the relentless pursuit of more would eventually deliver the peace I'd been seeking all along. What I found on the other side wasn't laziness, it wasn't falling behind, it wasn't the collapse I'd been conditioned to fear. It was my own brain, finally allowed to breathe, showing me what it actually looked like when it wasn't performing for an audience of algorithms, investors, and the ghost of my own inadequacy. It was my own heart, finally allowed to feel, revealing emotions I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten they existed. Grief, yes, but also joy, also wonder, also a tenderness toward life that had no place in the hardened armor of the hustler. It was my own soul finally allowed to speak, whispering truths that had been drowned out by the constant noise of more, more, more. And what I heard in that whisper changed everything. Let me gather the threads we've woven together, because in their weaving is a map, not of some distant territory, but of the landscape of your own life, waiting to be explored. The personal thread. My 30 days of stillness revealed that the exhaustion I'd been carrying wasn't the price of success.
It was the signal that my definition of success was broken. Not broken beyond repair, but broken in a way that required fundamental revision. The self that emerged from that revision wasn't less ambitious, it was more intelligently ambitious. It knew what to pursue and what to release, what to hold and what to let go. The conceptual thread. We explored the neuroscience of the default mode network, the part of your brain that integrates your sense of self, that generates creativity, that produces insight, and how hustle culture starves this network into silence. We examined the ancient wisdom traditions that have always known what science is only now confirming, that the deepest knowing emerges not from more effort, but from the kind of attention that only arises in stillness. We named the illusions, scarcity, future salvation, identity through achievement, that keep us running on treadmills that lead nowhere. The symbolic thread. Through parables and myths, the drowning man, the alchemist, the dreamer and the doer, the mirror cave, the river and the dam, we touched something deeper than concepts. We touched the archetypal patterns that have guided seekers for millennia. We felt, if only for a moment, what it might mean to stop running and start being, to surrender and discover that the water holds us, to face the mirror and find not nothing, but everything. The practical thread. We brought it all down to earth. Time and attention, money and meaning, relationships and boundaries, work and purpose, daily anchors that keep us connected to stillness even as we navigate the demands of the world. Practices that transform wisdom from abstraction into embodiment, because the truth that isn't lived isn't truth, it's just information, and information alone never changed anyone. So here we are, at the end of this journey together, and I have to ask you, not rhetorically, not as a storytelling device, but as a genuine question that deserves a genuine answer. What are you going to do with what you've felt here? Not what you've learned, we've learned plenty, but what you've felt, because it's in the feeling that transformation lives. The intellectual understanding is just the doorway. The feeling is the room. When you heard the story of the drowning man and how the water held him the moment he stopped fighting, did something in you recognize that struggle? Did something in you long to stop fighting just for a moment and feel what it's like to be held? When you sat with the image of the mirror cave and the seeker who found only himself, did something in you wonder what you'd find if you stopped long enough to look? Did something in you fear that looking and also somehow desire it?
When you considered the 5 daily anchors, the morning pause, the single task, the transition ritual, the body check, the gratitude close, did something in you know with a certainty beyond logic that these practices would change your life if you actually did them? That knowing, that feeling, that quiet recognition, that's not me talking. That's you. That's the part of you that's been waiting for permission to slow down, to breathe, to be. That's the wisdom that hustle culture has been shouting over for years, finally getting a word in. You stand now at a threshold. Every threshold has 2 directions, forward and back. Back is familiar. Back is the path you've been walking, with all its familiar pains and predictable frustrations. Back is the comfort of the known, even when the known is slowly killing you. Forward is uncertain. Forward means leaving behind the identity you've built, the story you've told yourself, the proof you've accumulated that you matter. Forward means facing the mirror cave and finding out what's actually there. Forward means discovering whether the water will hold you when you stop fighting. I can't tell you which way to go. That choice is yours and yours alone, as it should be. No one can walk your path for you. No one can do your integration for you. No one can face your mirror for you. But I can tell you this, the 30 days I spent in stillness weren't the end of my journey. They were the beginning. The insights I gained weren't conclusions, they were starting points. The person I became in that month isn't who I'll be for the rest of my life, because that person, like all persons, is still becoming, still growing, still unfolding. The difference is that now that unfolding happens with awareness. Now that growth happens with consent. Now that life happens with presence. And presence, I've discovered, is the only thing that was ever missing. Remember the 12 dimensions we've been weaving through this journey? Let me name them one last time, not as categories to master, but as invitations to inhabit. Health and fitness. Your body is not a vehicle for your ambition. It is the temple where your entire life occurs. Treat it accordingly. Emotional life. Your feelings are not obstacles to productivity. They are the color and texture of your existence. Feel them fully. Intellectual life. Your mind is not a tool for problem solving. It is a lens through which the universe experiences itself. Use it with awe. Character. Who you are when no one is watching is who you actually are. Let that person be someone you'd want to meet. Spirituality. The divine is not found in distant heavens. It is found in this breath, this moment, this ordinary miracle of consciousness. Love and relationships. Others are not means to your ends. They are ends in themselves, each a universe of experience. Meet them there. Parenting and legacy. You cannot give what you don't have. The greatest gift is your own wholeness, passed on through presence. Social life. Not everyone deserves your energy. Choose wisely and let the rest go with love. Financial life. Money is not the point, but how you handle it reveals what you believe about the point. Become conscious. Career. Your work is not your identity, but it can be an expression of your identity. Let it flow from who you are, not toward who you're trying to become. Quality of life. Joy is not in the destination, it's in the quality of attention you bring to the journey. Bring your best. Life experience. Meaning is not something you achieve, it's something you notice. Open your eyes.
Here's the truth I never expected to find. Quitting hustle culture didn't make me less productive, it made me more effective. It didn't make me less ambitious, it made my ambition more intelligent. It didn't make me less successful, it made my success more sustainable. The paradox is this: when you stop trying to prove your worth, you become free to actually create value. When you stop running from yourself, you become someone worth being. When you stop fighting the water, you discover it's been holding you all along. I didn't quit the game, I just stopped playing by rules that were designed to keep me exhausted, distracted, and small. I wrote new rules, rules that honor the full spectrum of what it means to be human, not just the parts that produce and perform. And you can too. So here's my invitation to you as we close this chapter together. Take your own 30 days, not necessarily 30 consecutive days of doing nothing, though if you can do that, do it, but 30 days of practicing presence, 30 days of the morning pause, 30 days of the single task, 30 days of the transition ritual, 30 days of the body check, 30 days of the gratitude close. 30 days of treating your attention as the sacred resource it is. 30 days of treating your presence as the gift it is. 30 days of treating your life as the miracle it is. And at the end of those 30 days, ask yourself, what's changed? Not in your circumstances, those may look exactly the same, but in you, in how you experience your circumstances, in what you notice, what you value, what you're available to. I can't promise you that everything will be easier. I can't promise you that your problems will disappear. I can't promise you that the world will stop demanding more, but I can promise you this: you will be different. And when you're different, everything is different. Not because the world changed, but because you changed, and you're the one experiencing the world. We've traveled far in this journey, from the frantic streets of hustle culture to the still waters of presence, from the neuroscience of attention to the ancient wisdom of the sages, from the personal story of one man's experiment to the universal invitation that experiment revealed. And now we arrive at the end, not of the journey never ends, but of this particular telling, this particular gathering of words and ideas and feelings. What happens next is up to you. You can close this video, return to your list, and resume the familiar patterns, the checking, the scrolling, the striving, the exhaustion. That path is always available. It asks nothing of you but your continued participation in your own depletion. Or you can pause, just for a moment, take a breath, feel what's here, and ask yourself, what would it look like to bring just a little more stillness into this life, just a little more presence, just a little more of you into the moments that are, after all, the only moments you'll ever have? The choice is yours. It's always been yours. It always will be yours. If this stirred something within you, if a single sentence landed, a single image took root, a single feeling awakened, then carry it, not as something to add to your list, but as something to integrate into your being. Reflect on it, not just today, but in the coming days. Let it echo, let it work on you, let it do its quiet, transformative work in the depths where real change happens. Live it, not perfectly, not consistently at first, but gradually. One moment of presence, one pause before reacting, one breath before rushing, one choice to be still in a world that never stops moving. And if you want more of this, more journeys into the intersection of psychology and spirituality, more explorations of what it means to live a conscious life in a chaotic world, more invitations to the stillness that holds everything, then subscribe and return often. Because every word here, every image, every invitation is designed for one purpose: to awaken the clarity and power already within you. Not to give you something you don't have, but to help you recognize what you've always had. Not to take you somewhere you've never been, but to help you be fully here, where you've always been, but never fully arrived. This is not the end. This is the beginning of your next chapter.